My talk is going to take us on a journey across a century of women. It's a 100-plus year odyssey of generations of college graduate women from a time when they were able to have either a family or a career, rarely both, to now when they anticipate having both a family and a career. More women than ever before are in striking distance of these goals. The fraction of women who have graduated from college or who will, for the most recent group of women by year of birth here, is about 45%. And of those who have graduated college, an increasing fraction have gone for the very highest degrees after their college graduation. And you can see that the fraction for men has remained constant for almost a half century, whereas that for women has increased enormously. And finally, in terms of these goals of family and career, is the goal of family. And part of the changes that has only recently been discussed is that college graduate women in the most recent birth groups have increased their fraction of having children now, so that only 20% of those who've reached 45 years old have not had a birth. And that number is the same as it was at the very end of the baby boom. So I've recently finished most of a book on this century-long journey, but my book, sort of like the Old Testament, was written in a BCE world. But here, that's before the Corona era. Many inequities have been exposed by the COVID-19 economy and society, most notably those concerning social justice and the criminal justice system. The COVID economy has also magnified gender differences at work and at home. Women are essential workers, but they're essential in two places at the same time. The increased burden from school closings that may continue to next year could erase years of gains by young women in a way that we have rarely seen. And this is where my talk is going to end. It's going to take us there, but we must first take the journey to that moment. And I'm going to begin the journey to the present, 120 years ago, when college graduate women faced a very stark choice between having family or having career. Some of them had a job, not a career. And the journey is going to wind up where more women than men, as we just saw, are graduating from college, and there is great similarity in their ambitions. This should make for a very happy ending, but that doesn't seem to be happening. A few clarifications. First, I'm going to focus on college graduate women because they have the greatest opportunities to achieve a career. And second is that a career is different from a job. Career is achieved, as the etymology of the word would lead us to think, over time by running a race, whereas a job is a spot position. You can earn a lot one year, but unless you ran that race, you're not going to have a career. Aspirations and achievements of college women across the century greatly changed with increased income and the mechanization of the household and greatly improved fertility control. But the way work is structured and the persistence of social norms, no matter how much weaker they are today than they once were, means less success for college graduate women. But what have been the aspirations and the achievements of women across the past 100 and so years? 5 distinct groups can be discerned. The first group graduated college at the beginning of the 20th century, and they achieved career or family. The second group was a transition generation between one that had very few children, that's group 1, and one that had many, that's group 3. And this transition generation, group 2, achieved a job and then a family. The third group was the subject of Betty Friedan's famous Feminine Mystique, and they graduated college from around 1946 to 1965. They achieved a family and then a job, rarely a career. And the fourth is my generation, graduating college from the heady 1960s to the end of the 1970s. And it's a group that attempted career and then a family. And the final, the fifth group, the most recent group, is desiring career and family. College graduate women first aspired to attain family or career, and few in this group managed both at the same time. In fact, they were split into two groups. Fully 50% of college graduate women in this group never had a birth or adopted a child. 32% never married throughout their lives, and just a small fraction worked if they were married. Almost all of those who weren't married did work. In group 2, more college women aspired to have careers, but the Great Depression intervened, and this transitional cohort got a job and then a family instead. As job opportunities improved, and as America was swept up in early marriages and a baby boom, college women shifted to planning for a family first and foremost, and then a job. As you can see, just 9% of this group never married, and 18% of the total never had a birth. Their labor force participation rates, not surprisingly, were low when this group was young, nurturing their young children, but it greatly increased to almost 3/4 when the kids were older and out of the house. Career and then family became the goal for many in group 4. This group greatly delayed marriage, although in the end they had high marriage rates. They greatly delayed having children for career, and they had high labor force participation rates when they were young. But many of them, fully 27%, never had children, as this Roy Lichtenstein print, an iconic print for this generation, reminds us. For group 5, the goal is not one or the other, not one first and then the other, but to have both together, to have career and family. And just 21%, as we saw before, do not have children by the time they're in their 40s. The 100-year transition from career or family to career and family is bookended here with women who have served in Congress, beginning with the amazing Jeanette Rankin, the first woman elected to federal office. She was typical of the career portion of her birth cohort. She never married, she had no kids, and she had a career, and she had a pretty amazing career, not just in Congress, but as an individual who worked tirelessly for suffrage, and by the way, was the only woman who was able to vote in Congress for that amendment. Tammy Duckworth is on the other side of this 100-year history. She's the first senator to have a baby while in office, And she's the first to bring a baby into an active session of Congress, although many would say that there have been babies in Congress before that time. Betty Friedan is in the middle, looking rather coquettish. You may be thinking that because of the enormously large increase in college graduation, that most of these differences that I've been telling you about across these groups concern selection of women into graduating from college. The surprising finding is that selection is not that important. I have tracked college entrance classes of women from the 1890s all the way to around the 1980s or so. These women have similar levels of ability. They have similar levels of parental resources. Their marriage ages and their birth fractions track those of the total group I've been showing you very closely. Treatment and not selection clearly dominates. College for group 1 had a treatment effect by enabling the women in this group to be financially independent. They didn't have to marry. As women's earnings abilities rose and as substitutes for household goods became cheaper, husbands' preferences, rather than changing, just became a lot more expensive. Though family was still placed ahead of job or career for group 3, that's the group of Betty Friedan and the Feminine Mystique, college women planned their confinement and they planned their escape. They trained to be teachers, nurses, social workers, librarians after the children were grown. For group 4, the pill and its dissemination to unmarried women enabled the delay of marriage. They enabled the delay of family, and they helped boost women's investments in education and their career. But the biological clock ran out for many of these women, as the Lichtenstein print reminds us. Marriage and family for group 5 are still being greatly delayed. In fact, they're being delayed more for group 5 than for group 4. But birth rates have actually, as we just saw, been up in part due to assisted reproductive technologies. The transition over this period, it's a long period. It was not swift, and it wasn't due mainly to dissent. Instead, it was often due to various technological advances, increased earnings, and increased education. Now, an important accompaniment to the transition across these groups concerns changes in customs and norms. For the past 50 years, the General Social Survey, the GSS, has asked respondents a question: whether individuals agreed with the statement that preschool children are likely to suffer if their mother works. I'm not quite certain what they mean by suffer, but that's the way the question was asked. And here I have graphed their answers by the respondents' birth year. And as you can see, agreement decreased. So the vertical axis here is the fraction agreeing with that statement. You can see in the early birth years for these respondents, about 70 to 80% agreed. More recently, about 20 to 30% agreed. Without any new evidence of whether children suffered or not, norms began to change because they became more expensive to sustain. Now, what about actually measuring how much success at career and family women in these groups actually achieved? To do this, and I thought it was important enough to do, To do this, I first needed some definitions. I need a definition of family, and I need a definition of career. So family here is defined as having at least one child, a biological child or an adopted child. It does not require a husband to be included as having a family. And unfortunately, it doesn't include dogs. So you have to have a real child, biological or adopted. That's family. That's the easy part. Career is the harder part. Career is achieved by exceeding a level of income for 3 years in the 5-year period. And as you can see here, I have 2 age groups. I do it for more age groups, but here I'm only showing 2. Each is a 5-year period. And to have a career, you have to exceed a level of income for 3 of each of the 5 years. Note as well that I have 3 of the groups here, group 3, group 4, part of group 5, because part of it isn't old enough yet, but I don't have data for groups 1 and 2. Now, the question is, what is that level of income? The level of income is given by the income of a same age and education man, so it would be a college graduate man here in each of these age groups, and it is exceeding what that individual would earn if that individual was at just the 25th percentile of the male distribution of income. And I use several longitudinal data sets here. So interestingly, success, so I'm measuring here success for women. The vertical axis is the fraction of the group achieving career and family at that age that's given. So success at career and family for women increase both across and within these birth cohorts. Success for the latest group, this group 5, is around 30% for the older women in their 50s, and that is about half of what it is for a comparable man. But it's just 22% for the younger women, or only 40% what it is relative to comparable men. So there has been great change over time, but the fraction achieving career and family is still not that high, and it's not that high relative to the husbands of these women. Even though a succession of women advanced on this journey, group after group, women's careers often still take a back seat to those of their husbands. As we see, the most recent group has not fared all that well, and they've expressed their disappointment and frustrations by focusing on a host of issues, such as bias in the workplace, pay inequity, salary transparency or its lack of, and sexual harassment in the workplace. We can see this in the counts of phrases used in the New York Times. And these phrases are both gender discrimination as a phrase and sex discrimination. Early on in this period, it would have been sex discrimination. Later on in the period, the New York Times would have used the term gender discrimination. And so what we can see is that there are 2 waves of what appear to be frustration in the workplace. The first wave occurred in the 1970s. Almost suddenly, it increases. And then it declines, and then it increases again in the 2010s. So for the earlier period, it's reflecting the noisy revolution of 50 years ago, and for more recently, it's reflecting the Me Too movement. But as each group progressed and pass the baton from group 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5. And as actual barriers, a ton of different barriers fell, and as social norms changed, the real underlying problem has actually been revealed. There's no question that there's been classic discrimination. There's no question that there are lots of bad actors out there. There's no question that there are biased workers and biased supervisors. There's no question that there's been sexual harassment. But most of the difference between men and women in terms of their careers and in terms of their pay is due to something else. The new problem with no name, to paraphrase Betty Friedan, is the notion of greedy work. That there are large nonlinearities and convexities in pay. To have a family takes the time of at least one parent. There's no way to contract out everything. And by and large, why have kids if you're going to contract out everything? The gender gap in earnings is an indication, it's a symptom of career blockage. So let's look at the gender gap in earnings. Women earn less than men on average. This is the long time series that we've all gotten used to. This is the one that we see every now and then and read about. It is female to male median annual earnings ratio for full-time year-round workers. What we don't often see is that we can do this by education. And if we, instead of looking at all workers, look just at college graduates, we would see that college graduate women have been earning even less relative to college graduate men, particularly since the 1980s. Now, a bunch of clues to what's going on in terms of the aggregate and in terms of what's happening since the 1980s is the following. Gender gaps in earnings exist for both annual earnings and hourly earnings. So women earn less than men not just because they work fewer hours. In fact, they earn less on an hourly basis. Another point to consider in thinking about why there is a gender gap is that women with children earn less than women without children. And in fact, women without children, after they have children, generally take a hit relative to the fathers of those, the father of that child. 3, earnings gaps increase with age of the woman to some point, and they increase, as I just noted, with many joyous events such as births and marriage. 4th is that the gaps are greater at the upper end of the male earnings and education distribution. And 5th is that earnings inequality matters a lot for the gender gap. The more unequal earnings are in an occupation, the lower are women's earnings relative to men's. And one of the reasons that we see this widening in the 1980s is that's when there has been increasing inequality in the United States. And finally, gender gaps in earnings are greater for occupations that have more demands on employee time and where client relationships matter the most. There is another side, a flip side to gender inequality. And that flip side is couple inequity. Working mothers are on call at home, and working fathers are on call at work. The reasons for both gender inequality and couple inequity are the same. The issues are really the flip side of the same problem. Many jobs especially the higher earnings ones, pay far more on an hourly basis when the work is, yes, on-call, rush, evening, weekend, and by and large, unpredictable. And these time commitments interfere with family responsibilities. The problem is illustrated here. One job is flexible, the red line, and it has a linear wage with respect to hours. And this horizontal axis that I call hours may not be number of hours, it may be which hours, it may be weekend hours, evening hours, unpredictable hours. The other job is not so flexible. That's the blue line. And it has a wage that rises with hours. The couple with children can't both work at the blue dot. If they both worked at the blue dot, their children would perish. But they could both work at the red dot. But if they worked at the red dot, they would be leaving a lot of money on the table. They'd be leaving the area in brackets. So one works at the flexible, less remunerative job, the red job, and the other works at the less flexible, so one works at the more flexible but less remunerative job, and the other works at the less flexible but more remunerative job at the blue dot. For many highly educated couples with children, as I said, she's the professional who's also on call at home, and he's the professional who's also on call at the office. In consequence, he earns more than she does. And that gives rise to a gender gap in earnings, and it also produces couple inequity. If the flexible job were more productive, the difference would be a lot less, and family equity would be cheaper. Couples would be able to purchase this cheaper family equity, and you'd reduce the gender gap. Note that even if these were same-sex couples, there could still be couple inequity, but without gender inequality. And even if couples really wanted a 50-50 relationship, high earnings for the position that had less controllable, less predictable hours would entice them to engage in what we might think of as a newfangled version of the old division of labor. So what are the solutions? First off, any solution must involve lowering the cost of this amenity, which we can call temporal flexibility. The simplest would be to create really good substitutes. Clients then could be handed off with no loss of information. IT could be used to pass information with little loss in fidelity. Teams of substitutes, not teams of complements, could be created, as they have been, in fields, high-income fields, such as pediatrics, anesthesiology, veterinary medicine, personal banking, many tech jobs, and primary care physicians. The cheaper the amenity, the more linear pay becomes by hours worked. But the tale that I've been telling you was set in a BCE world. What does it tell us about the new era, an era that I will call DC, that's during Corona, and an era just around the corner that I'm going to call ACDC, which is a combination of after and during. So note here, so this is from a recent piece in the New York Times by Deb Perelman, who's best known for her articles on cooking. And Deb Perelman remarks in the subheading, essentially she's saying, can we have both? She said, in this economy, you can have one or the other. You can't have both. And that sort of shades of going way back to the early 20th century to Group 1. In mid-March, suddenly and swiftly and unpredictably, we descended into a DC world. Most workers sheltered in place. They worked from home. Fortunate children had online schooling and at-home help. But what happened to childcare hours, and what do we see is going to happen to childcare hours and the work of parents? So here, the vertical axis gives us weekly hours for couples. So I'm looking here only at college graduate women married to college graduate men, both of whom are employed and they have at least one child. The horizontal axis gives us family type. It is the age of the youngest child. Focus first on the blue bars. The blue bars are from data that we have in the American Time Use Survey, the ATUS. And I'm using here the survey from 2010, sort of after the Great Recession, to 2018. In the BCE world, college graduate employed mothers, remember all of these are employed mothers, with college graduate employed husbands and school and at least one child, were doing around 60% of total childcare hours. And I'm not including here household activities like food preparation. The fraction done by women is given by the number above the bars. So you can see that for the school-age kids, 6 to 13, 6 less than 13, it's about 58%. For the little kids, it's about 66% is the fraction of the total being done by the mothers. For working couples, the DC world, the red bars, involved almost double the child care hours. These red bars are derived from a number of surveys that people have done in April, this past April. The data that they collect isn't fully comparable to what's in the ATUS, but I've sort of, for the time being, hammered it in place. The 2020 ATUS is not going to come out for some time. Now, but in addition to the fact that we had 90% of these kids out of school and everyone was at home, and there was a lot more child care, there was also for women a lot more parental sharing. And the fraction that women did, you can see, actually fell, even though the total numbers almost doubled. So for those 6 less than 13, they're doing 52% of the total. I also want to mention that these are really special people. These are college educated, they're well-to-do, they have a fair amount of resources, and these aren't single moms, so these are couples. And if I look at what the mothers themselves are doing, and note the change in the vertical axis here in that this is now only for the women. Women, as I said, did a lot more, but men added considerably in the DC world to their plates. Now we are moving into what I call an AC-DC world. And the AC-DC is that we're going to have part-time school in some districts, perhaps no school except for online school in other districts. Very few districts are going to have all kids going 5 days a week for the full length of time. Also, child care is another area that has increased, but probably not as much as it was previously. But at the same time this is happening to childcare and education, full-time work in many offices and workplaces has begun. So what can we expect? For women, the AC/DC world is given by these light red bars, will be the BCE world on steroids. And the reason I will give you in a second, but here I'm really going a little further out on a data limb, and I have to make a fair number of assumptions. And the scenario that I have here is that when schools are open half-time in the AC/DC world, total childcare hours are going to be halfway between what I know they were from the ATUS to what I construct they are in the April, the during Corona period. But because of nonlinearities in work that I was just talking about, one member of the couple is going to go back to work full time because even my college graduate couples have rent to pay and mortgages to pay. And the other member of the couple is going to work probably part-time from home and take care of the kids the other part of the time. And if history is any guide, it's the men who are going to go back to work full-time and revert to their BCE childcare levels. Fathers' hours in the three regimes are going to look like this. That is, the light red bar is going to be identical to what it was in the BCE world given to me by the AT, the American Time Use Survey. And so what's going to happen is that women are going to take up the slack and do a greater share of the total. So the bottom line is that there are going to be no net gains from women in the AC/DC world. So they're going to be doing the same number of hours of childcare. They're going to be doing a greater fraction. So look again at the 6 less than 13-year-old group. So they had been doing about 60%. When everyone was at home, they did 52%, and they did a lot more in terms of total hours. But in the AC/DC world, they're going to do the same number of hours, but they're doing a much greater fraction of that because what they gain from the fact that school is open half-time, they lose from the fact that the fathers of these children are at work full-time. Because of convex hourly pay, couple equity is expensive for the family unit, and that's going to continue, and women's careers, by and large, will probably be set back. Recall that the corrective in the BCE world was change the workplace, drive down the price of flexibility. The corrective in the AC/DC world must add, change the care place, drive down the cost of child care. So in conclusion, when schools first began in the United States centuries ago, and when they expanded during the high school movement in the early 20th century, a coordinated equilibrium was provided by good government. Good government could do the same today. We need to find safe ways to have classes for children, for their future, and for their parents today. As in the Great Depression, we have unemployed labor. We have, in fact, highly educated unemployed labor today in the form of recent college graduates who don't have jobs. So they could be harnessed in a new works progress manner, as in the New Deal, and set to work helping to educate children and freeing parents, that is mainly women, to work. In the BCE world, when the cost of flexibility is lowered, we will have solved the problem and achieved both gender equality and couple equity. In the AC/DC world, we have to reduce the cost to parents of educating children. The original journey was from career or family to career and family, and by and large, the journey continues. Thank you.